In an era where every recipe gets a photograph, what happens when an author decides to go with illustrations instead? Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. I'm Molly Stevens, and today I am here with Kate Leahy. Hello, Kate.
Hello, Molly.
Have you ever, or would you ever, consider working on an illustrated cookbook? No photographs.
I have never worked on an illustrated cookbook. I think the closest I've come is several years ago. I worked with Peter Liam to help him sort of put his thoughts together. He already had a manuscript, but I was sort of the pre-developmental editor coming in to help him just organize his thoughts. The book was Champagne, a deep dive into the Champagne region. Peter had already kind of sourced these beautiful vintage maps that dated back to World War II era. The book came with a drawer that reproduced those maps. However, as we worked together on the book, it seemed to also make sense to have maps illustrated in the book. I think it was later in the game, after the photo shoot had been well earlier, we floated the idea of what about some more illustrations, simple maps? Now that I think about it, those maps were watercolor.
Wow.
Thinking about, it's not that it's easy to do watercolor,
right?
But there's an ease on the eyes. It's pleasing to the eyes to have it on the page versus the very specific needs of a photo.
Right.
There's a timeless quality to it, I think is what I'm trying to say.
It's an interesting proposition. I mean, when we've talked about the evolution of cookbooks and, there was a time before Martha Stewart where books didn't even have photographs, right? And they might have little line drawings or something. I mean, you think about the earliest joy of cooking is one of my favorite illustrations it's about skinning a squirrel.
Oh my God.
It's like a hiking boot on the squirrel, pulling the squirrel skin. I mean, it's, very basic illustration.
It's a great specific detail.
Right? But what we're talking about today is a very different kind of illustration. These are lovely watercolors. We're going to be talking to Cathy Whims, is the author, chef, and then her illustrator, Kate Lewis, who did these watercolors to illustrate a new book called The Italian Summer Kitchen. It's just so interesting in a time when you go through your Instagram feed or your other social media, there's just you're bombarded with these stunning photographs of plates of food. But it does something to the imagination as a home cook, I think, when you're flipping through a cookbook that's filled with beautiful pictures and you make something and then you put it next to the picture, you're always comparing to, I don't know, it's just different.
It's different. It also, this is where you get in trouble as an author. Say the photo shoot happens and the colors weren't working. Right. So you add a garnish and then you have to remember to go back to that document and put parsley, optional, just to make sure that whatever's in the photo is represented in the recipe itself.
Right.
If you are doing a more evocative, say, watercolor, I'm not looking at that watercolor thinking, oh, well, there's a lot more parsley in the painting than there is in the recipe.
I mean, I also think it's a bold choice as an author, because I know as an author myself, we read our comments, whether we admit to it or not. And I've had several comments that say there aren't enough photographs in this book. I mean, we all hear it because photographs cost money. And it seems like readers, the audience, has an insatiable appetite for more photographs of the food. So I think as an author, to come out and say, no photographs, we're going to have a book that's just got drawings in it. And so I'm very curious when we talk to Cathy and Kate, when that decision came about and what they were trying to achieve with it, because I love it. I think it's very timeless.
Yes. It's really like producing a mini movie to put a photo shoot together. So the idea of having an illustrator and an author working in tandem without all the extra props and all that, it feels fresh and it also feels very enticing.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting about this book is it's an Italian cookbook. Let's talk about a crowded category. And it's a chef book.
Chef book, but not like a chef book that you've seen before.
Right. It's not a restaurant book. It's The Italian Summer Kitchen, Timeless Recipes for La Dolce Vita. It's written by Cathy Whims, who is a 6 times James Beard finalist. She's from Portland, Oregon. She's worked in kitchens for over 40 years. She owns and operates 3 restaurants in Portland today, Nostrana, Oven and Shaker, and Enoteca Nostrana. She leads culinary tours in Italy, and she's just published her first cookbook.
Joining her in this project is the illustrator Kate Lewis. Kate has taught art and she studied at the Art Institute of Chicago, and she works primarily in watercolor and acrylic. This is her 3rd book she's illustrated, but I believe it's her first cookbook, and we're going to hear all about it.
Well, Cathy and Kate, welcome to Everything Cookbooks.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Cathy, I want to start with you a little bit. We read an interview you did in Portland Monthly Magazine back in April about the origin of this book, The Italian Summer Kitchen, and how you said in this article how originally it was a much bigger book, like a restaurant book. Can you tell us about like how you pivoted to what the book became?
The restaurant book, which was my original concept for Nostrana, my restaurant, was a pre-COVID thing. And we were shopping it to different publishers. I'm working with Martha Holmberg, which was amazing. I was so lucky to work with her. And then COVID hit, and suddenly no publisher was really interested in it. We had put so much work into it that I really didn't want to give up. And I think also at that time, the restaurant was shut down for, I think, 7 months or something before we opened a tent in the parking lot just to start doing business again during COVID.
As one did.
Yeah, I know. And boy, that was a lot of work. I was cooking at home all the time. And I sort of had told myself and my husband that the only way I was going to get through this pandemic emotionally was to have a nice lunch and a nice dinner a day. And so I think that's what started it. You know, it was summertime then. There were all kinds of amazing vegetables available. I started to think about what I really like is to encourage people to cook at home more than I want to encourage people to go out to a restaurant, even though that's my livelihood. Right. So maybe I shot myself in the foot. But it suddenly seemed like very natural and easy to do and easy to conceive of. And I was cooking a lot of the recipes that are in the book already at home, and they're recipes that I cook, you know, I go back to like all the time. So they're things I want to eat again and again and again. And I thought, well, maybe that's the book. And so I reworked it with my agent, Sharon Bowers, who was incredibly helpful. And then Sharon introduced me to Kate Lewis, Kate here, said, hey, why don't we do an illustrated book? And I said, I love illustrated books. One of my favorite illustrated books are the ones by Leslie Forbes, and I've had them since the 70s, I believe. And I just think illustrations are so evocative and encouraging, and photographs of perfect food can be kind of discouraging to readers. So it just kind of naturally came out of that.
I love that what you're saying there. I understand what you mean about COVID sort of changing what kind of book you thought you would write. I was working as a co-author on a project, and it was being shopped around during COVID, and it had a lot of travel elements in it. And it was like, who wants this book now? It just didn't feel right. But in this case, it seemed like this really put you into the home cook seat, which is so rare for a chef, right? To just be thinking, oh, what would someone want to cook if they don't have access to all the riches of a professional kitchen?
I love that.
Well, it's interesting when you think about like that Nostrana book. As a chef, I mean, you've been at this for many, many years, Cathy.
Yeah.
You've had, many successful restaurants. And so that impulse to write a book in the first place, it would make sense that it would be associated with Nostrana because that's so much of your legacy. So it's a chef book because you're a chef and you wrote it, but it's not a chef book at all.
Yeah, I would agree about that. It's really how I cook at home. And I think that's what's so great about Italian food is that the great Italian recipes, like, let's just say, not that it's in the book, like bolognese sauce or something that's stewed for a really long time. Those aren't very summery recipes, but you want to eat them again and again when that season comes around. And then when summer season comes around, like, I just want to eat anything that's like fresh and bright. Zucchini, like before I wrote this book, I really didn't care much for zucchini. I mean, I kind of appreciated it, but I always thought it was kind of boring, and I rarely cooked it at home. But I remember it was a cold winter before COVID, and here in Portland, when the farmers market was opening back up, there was really young, perfect zucchini in like April, and I just wanted something so fresh. I was so sick of root vegetables that suddenly, like, zucchini was like the bright part of my life. And there are actually, I think, are 8 or 9 zucchini recipes.
Yeah, they
in
really,
the book.
there's a lot of zucchini in here.
A lot of zucchini.
It's interesting. It's really like this rediscovery. And you mentioned that Sharon, your agent, Sharon Bowers, was the one who suggested the illustrations and even suggested Kate. Kate, I want to know, how did Sharon know about you? Because you haven't done a lot of cookbooks before.
No, I hadn't. I believe they found me through the first book I illustrated, Artist in Residence, where I illustrated well-known artists' homes, the interiors of their homes. I think from there, they had the vision that I could potentially illustrate a cookbook, which at the time I didn't even know if I could do it when they first asked me. But I'm happy I said yes, and I gave it a try.
Yeah, and I'm very happy that Kate said yes.
Okay, so Sharon Bowers comes to Cathy with this great idea, and Kate, you get this notion, okay, I want to try to do this. What happens next?
I mean, I remember looking at your work and falling in love with it and thinking it was the perfect fit. And then I feel like we just started working, but maybe I forgot something. What do you remember?
I know. I think we worked on this book quite a while. So it's been several years. I think 22 is when we first connected, and so it took several years to make the book. I think you sent me a few recipes, and I remember one of the first things I painted was the inside of an artichoke, like cut in half. That was the first time I'd ever painted food. It was like a little test for me, and it turned out I really loved what I did. So that I was like, okay.
Wait, that artichoke is in the book, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's a full page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, did you take an artichoke and cut it in half and paint that, or?
No, I found a random artichoke online as my inspiration. I also painted lemons. I think Cathy sent me a few recipes, and I chose some ingredients and painted a few little things. And then the other thing from my memory is, Cathy, you sent me an image of a photo you had taken out of a window of water and boats. I believe it was in Venice, with green shutters. And I painted that picture that you had taken of Venice, because what we had talked about is that you wanted the cookbook to give a sense of Italy as a place, not only about the food, but as if you were like going on a vacation there as you were looking through the book. So I painted that image as part of the proposal as well.
And your decision to work in watercolor, I know you also work in acrylics.
Practically, for illustration, watercolor is so much faster for me to paint. And because the proposal and the contract was to make 50 illustrations, I ended up doing more than that, because once I start going, I tend to become obsessive about it. So just the pace and how fast watercolors dry, and then technically that I can scan them easier than working with acrylic on canvas, which is what else I paint. It's just not the same quality of the image. It's easier when I work on paper and watercolor.
I think watercolor was sort of set in my head, and Sharon Bowers' head too. It just this fluidity and its evocativeness of summer vacation life in Italy. And Italians are, by natural right, they own a summer vacation. You know, Ferragosto in the middle of August is like a national holiday, and everyone takes off. Nothing happens, and that just seemed to me the spirit of the book and what we wanted people to feel when they were making the recipes and being inspired by the watercolors.
We talk a lot about how you differentiate a book, like how an editor will look at a proposal. And Cathy, you know better than anybody, the Italian cookbook field is very crowded. There's a lot of books on that shelf, right?
I was really worried about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious about the choice to make it a summer book. I mean, I think you've answered that in many ways because it was summer for you in COVID when you were cooking your way kind of out of the pandemic. But that's a very, not bold, but it's a very strong decision to say it's going to be the Italian summer kitchen. So the Bolognese is not in here. It's not an Italian travel book. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, when I think about the customers that come to the restaurant, my former restaurants as well, like they love telling me about their trip to Italy. It's almost always summer. I used to joke, it's often Tuscany. And I don't know, it just seems sort of natural to me that as travelers to Italy, I feel like that's what they relate to. Like they're more likely to choose summer, one, because their children are out of school, and two, because they want really wonderful weather. It just seemed to be what people would most relate to. And it seems to be working that way. So I'm really happy about it.
Yeah. And also just pairing it with watercolors, it gives it that sense of lightness and ease.
Exactly.
When it's hot or when the weather is warm, you're not spending hours in a kitchen making, complex braises, right? You want these zucchini forward recipes. You want a lot of tomatoes. I'm curious to know how you found a home for this book at Countryman Press. How did you find your editor there?
Well, I remember now, Kate, we were working with this other publisher, and then somewhere I remember it was November, like we'd only been with them for not many months, and they just dropped the book.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that right?
Yes, it is. And I understand that's pretty rare.
This would be a first on our podcast, hearing authors get dropped, after you're already signed.
We were pretty heartbroken.
What happened?
The editor left.
Oh, that's right.
So this is why it's important to have a good agent. So Sharon Bowers, she's the one who shepherded this project, then found a home at Countryman Press.
Exactly. Well, they had already given us an offer, and we had gone with this other publisher. And so we went back to them, and they were still interested. So, but yeah, Sharon totally did all of that. I personally wouldn't have known what to do, and we probably would just be dead in the water.
Yeah, it really worked out. And Countryman, from my perspective, was a great publisher to work with. They had this, I feel like the same vision Cathy did for the illustrated cookbook, and really did a great job.
I was thinking about just if I were an acquiring editor and I'm seeing proposals, I could see some acquiring editors getting really excited about an illustrated book and other acquiring editors having a different vision. Like, oh, we like these recipes, we like this concept, but we want photography. Do you remember any of the feedback that you might have received from editors when the book was on submission?
That they perhaps would want photography? No, I don't think that it came up at all. I mean, I don't want to say it was completely effortless because, there was a lot of work that I did testing recipes and deciding what recipes, and there was a lot of work that Kate did and us interacting, and we would be on phone conversations and talk about, what would be representative of the recipes, and we would give ideas, and Kate would ask questions, and there was a lot of work involved, but once we had the publisher and once we started going, I expected a lot of editing and everything that we would hear, like, well, you need to work on this doesn't work out. And that really didn't happen. It kind of just, suddenly it was a full-formed book. That's not what I expected at all.
Right. There was a lot to manage on this book. Danielle Santoni was your co-writer on this book.
My co-writer, yes.
And then you had your recipe testers. There were a lot of moving parts to manage.
I also had an amazing assistant, Andrew Dupuy, who really helped me. So I had a lot. It was a real collaborative effort.
Project managing in itself is, you're used to running restaurants, so you have obviously experience doing it, but you've got a recipe list that I'm assuming was in the proposal. I think it's around 70 plus recipes, plus the 15 or so basics. There's everything from drinks, dessert, salads. It's really got the full, but choosing that recipe list and then ushering it through development, writing, testing. What was that process like for you? Managing all that.
Well, again, I had a lot of help.
Yeah.
And she was amazing. She had traveled to Italy. She was very much in love with Italy. And although she hadn't traveled as much as I have, she was really open to learning and getting things really down and true to the place of where the recipe was from. And that was extremely helpful. She had a whole group of people that in her former cookbooks that she had either written under her own name or for other people that were recipe testers. And they were very enthusiastic recipe testers. As we sent those out, they would make the recipe and get right back to us and say, this worked or this didn't work, but mostly this worked. It was completely surprising to me because I was very insecure about the whole thing. So that just really kept pushing it forward. And then my assistant, Andrew, really collaborated super well with Danielle, my co-author. I would tease them and say it's like you guys were like brother and sister separated at birth or something. Like they really hit it off. And I think that really made things go a lot easier.
Right. Let's get into some of the recipes. Molly and I were going through, and Molly, I think you said you're definitely making that pork tenderloin baked in a baguette.
I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with that.
Savory fruit risottos. There's, pizza with Dungeness crab. There's this mix of Italian inspiration, but also being a restaurateur in Portland. Talk us through some of these recipe ideas, why you knew they had to be in this book.
I'd love to talk through some of the recipes. And actually, since you first mentioned pork tenderloin and baguette, filetto di maiale in crosta. So that's a recipe that I discovered from a butcher friend. He wrapped the tenderloin in the pancetta, wrapped it all around it, and put it inside the baguette. And for some reason, I got it wrong, and I wrapped the baguette with the pancetta. But it worked out, and so we kept it that way. I apologized to him, and he was very kind to let me use the recipe. So that's one of the funnest things, and I think it's a great dish to take on a picnic. It's very surprising. Like, I would have never thought of it.
And it's one that also, Kate, you illustrated. Did Cathy send you a picture?
She did not. The funny thing about that recipe is that as I was illustrating this book, my mom is a big cook and she was always interested in the recipes and what I was working on. And she actually made this in her home and took pictures for me and raved about it. She actually made it for her book club and they loved it, Cathy. So I used my mom's photographs of her.
I love that. I don't remember if you told me that.
I don't think
you did.
I told you that. And I had to make my mom promise not to post pictures about it.
That's amazing. There's some of the recipes are inspired by your travels, but then others, for say the Dungeness crab, or there's a pork sausage that's got tomatillos, and I don't know, maybe they cook with tomatillos in Italy a lot, but it seems to me, I mean, you use poblano peppers, that there is this cross-cultural thing happening as well.
I thought that was important because I really wanted to speak of what ingredients were in season here in Portland, what we use at the restaurant. And so there's a peppers and crema, we call it. We make every summer and early fall. And we have 2 Mexican women that have worked with us since we opened Nostrano, so that's 20 years. And they started making poblano peppers in a cream sauce for us to eat as employees at the restaurant. And it was so good that we decided to put it on the menu, and we kind of Italianized it by serving it with polenta as opposed to serving it with corn tortillas. And the tomatillos, actually, I do know a chef who lives in the town of Bavaria, and he grows a lot of his own vegetables, and he made that pork sausage dish with tomatillos. And I think traditionally it would be made with just grapes, but he added grapes because he had them in his garden to the tomatillos, and I just thought that was brilliant and seasonal. So yeah, there's a lot of things that come from different influences, chefs that I've met, cooks that I work with at my own restaurant, chefs at my restaurant. There's the zucchini recipe. That's a zucchini salad with raw, thinly sliced zucchini with a rich tomato vinaigrette that comes on on the menu at this time of year at the restaurant. And one of my former head chefs, Brian Murphy, came up with that recipe himself, and he was kind enough to let me use it in the book. So there are a lot of different influences that way.
It's what makes it a personal book.
Right.
I think so, yeah.
I wanted to get into a little bit more about how the illustrations came together with the recipes. Kate, that's such a good story about your mom making the pork tenderloin and baguette for her book club. How did you work with Cathy and Danielle to figure out what you were going to be illustrating and making sure you were getting the right mix of illustrations, some that are of Italy and some that are of food? How did that work?
We got into a really nice rhythm, and Andrew, Cathy's assistant, really helped us out organizing this. We would have weekly Zoom calls. It was mainly Cathy and Danielle talking about the recipes and Cathy telling fabulous stories about her times in Italy and cooking. So I would listen to these stories about each recipe. And as we were all talking, Cathy would talk about visuals that would come up for her, and I would mention visuals, and Danielle would as well. So that was our process of these weekly calls where we would try to get through several recipes a week. It just kind of happened organically as to how many food things I illustrated versus Italian scenes. It was very instinctual, I will say, overall, how that came about from my end.
And then once you make a watercolor, is there any editing that happens?
Yes. And that has evolved for me over time as an illustrator. So this book was the second book I was working on, but at the same time, I was working on illustrating The Secret Garden, the classic children's story.
Sure.
As I was working on both, I started playing around with digital editing as well. So while all of these are watercolors on paper initially, they're all about 9 by 12 inches generally. I would scan it, and then on my iPad, I use the program Procreate with my Apple Pencil, and I could go back and edit things out. For instance, in some recipes, there was some shrimp in with the pasta, and I had illustrated shrimp for another recipe. So I just took those shrimp and put them in the pasta. So I got a little clever.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
so
amazing.
If you look really closely, it's the same shrimp in both illustrations.
There's this beautiful illustration, a whole page of shrimp. It's on page 83 for anyone looking at the book. I love this. And I was thinking this could be a print on a shirt, on a dress. Like, it's just so gorgeous. So those are the shrimp that ended up being in the pasta in a different size.
Exactly.
Amazing.
I had a lot of fun being able to go in and digitally modify things. And also, it's a way digitally to get rid of just random marks or mistakes that I make. But it's minimal digital editing. For the most part, it is traditional watercolor on paper that I then scan and size appropriately for the publisher.
And then you submit, just as a photographer would submit files of their photographs, you submit files of the watercolors, and then the designer knits it all together.
Yes. So I labeled all of my files by the recipe name. I kind of get on a roll, and I did a lot of kind of extra fun, like a Vespa and a orange tree with a bike and little scenes, statues in Rome, and name those just extra.
A tube of tomato paste, things like that. And then how about the design elements like the lines under the recipe titles and the end pages? Are those also yours? They certainly look like it.
They are. I love illustrated books that have little extra doodles, and the end papers are some of my favorite. I just love opening a book and being surprised by beautiful papers. So I was just like, here's a bunch of options and do what you will with them.
And as far as paper, did you know what paper quality or texture or style the publisher would use?
No, I didn't know. Working with some publishers, they will talk to me about that and give options. Countryman didn't do that, but I love what they chose, and I think it's a beautiful book.
Yeah, it really works. And that's why I was asking, because I've seen books where the paper choice doesn't necessarily match whether it's photographs or illustrations. And here it really feels like it matches, that your watercolors look really nice on these pages, on this print quality. So
thank you. I agree. I think they made a wonderful choice.
I'd love to ask you both about the cover. A lot of times the cover is one of the most challenging things to get right in a cookbook because it has to do so many things. And, a lot of times it's like, oh, is the author on the cover? Is it a plate of food? But when it's an illustrated cover, it's a completely different conversation. So, Cathy, did you have ideas you wanted for the cover? This beautiful sort of like picnic scene. Is that the first idea, or sales and marketing had opinions?
Yeah, I think that they had opinions, and I think they gave us some options, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kate. We got to say what was our favorite. I can't remember what the other options are right now, but I think this one, we really wanted it. I loved how the table's slightly slanted. To me, it just screams summer. It's like a lovely meal in the summer, and who wouldn't want to eat that?
Yes, that's my memory too, that they used the illustrations that I had submitted and came up with, I want to say, at least 3 or 6 cover options. I gravitated towards this one as well. I love blue and white tablecloths. And in those, weekly discussions, Cathy talked a lot about picnics. And this to me does feel like a picnic in the summer. And it felt true to her vision for the book too.
Yeah. It pulls in the end papers as well, the blue and white. You were talking about production, and often with photographed cookbooks, you have to turn in the manuscript and allow enough time for a photo shoot and then the production of the photos. So I'm just wondering, in terms of when this manuscript was due, in terms of when the book came out, what was that time frame?
I don't know, but I do know one thing, and I have many, many friends that, have done cookbooks like both of you. And I know there's a period when the cookbook has photographs that there's all this remaking all the rest and photographing it. And it sounds like such a project when I talk to my friends. And I know that the illustrations were a lot of work for Kate, but at least we didn't have to go back and make everything again and have it be photographed. I felt very lucky about that.
Yeah.
So I'm picturing these weekly meetings. You meet about the recipes. Kate goes into her studio, paints the scenes that you've discussed that week. The following week, you have another meeting. More scenes or recipes have been decided. How many weeks of meeting was that?
I feel like it was a year.
I think so. Because we changed publishers, the project kind of stalled for a while, but then we picked it back up. Overall, it was about a year of work and a solid 3 months of weekly calls and then trickling calls over the next 9 months or so.
This is a question for you, Cathy, in terms of back to the beginning of the conversation about your inspiration and the baby zucchinis and the summer markets. And I'm hearing about the timeline. Some of this development was happening not in the summer. So what was it like in February when you're, working on a recipe that's meant to be full on summery, and it's like, oh, I've got to make it. And we've all, as recipe developers, we've all been there. We're often there.
Yeah, exactly. I found that part very depressing.
Yeah.
If I had to make a recipe with, going to a regular old grocery store, not the farmer's market, and buying some out of season tomato or some huge zucchini.
All of it, a bunch of basil, all of it, yeah.
Incredible downer. That just made me so sad because it's not how we cook at the restaurant. It's not how I cook at home, and it's probably not how any of the 4 of us cook ever if we don't have to. But I just told myself I have to do this.
Yep.
And just imagine what it would be with high quality produce, in season. And I tested the things that sometimes were more maybe more meat oriented and everything. So the in season vegetables that needed to be in there maybe weren't at least the only ingredient. There were other stronger ingredients, and that helped too.
Yeah. But I just bring it up because a lot of our listeners are also recipe developers and cookbook authors, and we've all been there, and it does feel depressing. But I just always remind myself I'm doing it in service of the work, and that when I go through this book, it just has this summer vibe. You've pulled it off, but it's a reality of the work that we do. And certainly, Kate, your watercolors add so much sunshine to it as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I would say that your subtitle, Timeless Recipes for La Dolce Vita, the book feels timeless. And I think it's in part because the recipes are timeless and also because the illustrations give it a timeless quality. There's something about illustrations that don't have to be time-stamped as much as a photo would have to be time-stamped. A photo, if it was taken in the 1980s versus 2025. With a watercolor, it can kind of feel like whatever moment you want. If you want it to look nostalgic, but if you want it to look present day, it's kind of like wherever you want to go with it.
Mm-hmm. I love that about it.
I agree.
So would you do a winter version of this book?
I would love to. I'm so glad you asked that question. No one has brought that up to me, but I would love to do a winter version. In fact, that would probably be the first season that I would choose, although fall would be hard to turn down too. At Nostrana, we have so many winter recipes that are really unusual and that I would love to tell people about in a winter cookbook. You think about the areas of Trentino or Alto Adige or the Val d'Aosta, where it's a wintry climate for a good part of the year, and they have so many unusual dumplings and things like that, and pasta shapes that people don't think of very often. That would be really fun to turn readers on to. And teach them more that Italian food isn't just bright and sunny and, Tuscany and Umbria and Sicily, that there's all other kinds of dishes that are worth knowing about too.
Right. Kate could dip into a different part of her watercolor box.
I know. I was just trying to envision what those watercolors would be.
Because this book has such a vibe, one of the things we'd love to ask both of you is what you were striving for on this book and if you feel you achieved it.
I just wanted to help ground the reader in Italian summer and almost like they were going on a little vacation while flipping through the book. That was my intention, just to have fun and enjoy what I was doing and what I was painting. And that would in turn, translate for the reader and the viewer. Cathy shared with me a lot of her photos from her travels through Italy and from dishes from her restaurant. I also had two really good friends travel to Italy while I was illustrating, and I asked them to take photos while they were traveling, and they did. Both of them just sent me hundreds of photos just of random things throughout the countryside. So I was just channeling Italy the whole time and just tried to evoke the feeling of being there. So that was my intention.
I think that was my similar intention too. Again, back to making these recipes and deciding which ones would go in the book, and it being early COVID is like, who didn't want to travel? It's like, that's what everyone wanted to do. I'm a Sagittarian. I love travel. I can't live without traveling. I think I just wanted to evoke that feeling and have people be able to, if they couldn't take a trip, they could at least feel like they were on a trip. And I think that's the illustrations really do drive that home and make it really work.
I love that. Yeah. I didn't ask it before, but the trim size of the book, I know you talk one of your essays, Cathy, about being able to put it in a tote bag and take it with you to the beach kind of thing. But I'm wondering if the size, even though there's close to over 80 recipes in here and there's a lot of information, it still has a very tidy little portable feel to it. It's got a lightness to it. And I'm wondering, Kate, as an illustrator, did you know the trim size was going to be the size it was?
Yes. As an illustrator, it's important for me to know that just for proportion. For me as a home cook, I love the size of it. It's very usable in the kitchen. And for illustrating, the size of it really worked out in my favor.
I think also that the thing about putting it in a tote bag, that came up at the very beginning of this book. Sharon Bowers came up with that. She said, how about this book has about 50 to 70 recipes, It's something if you're renting an Airbnb or you're going to your own beach house or your own mountain house for a little vacation that you can just throw it in your tote bag, bring a knife with you. And these are recipes that you could make in a kitchen that's not even yours, where you're, possibly a little uncomfortable because it's not that well equipped. So that was always there from the beginning, and that's so nice that you said that.
Yeah.
Right. My mom always complains that certain cookbooks she hates because they don't stay open on the counter and they're too big. So this is like digestible. It's not going to weigh you down. You can open up a page, you'll find a recipe quickly that you want to make. There's something really enjoyable about that. Not feeling like a book is homework, that it's going to be a joy to cook from.
It's friendly. And there's even the essay in there, Cathy, about what to take to your Airbnb or your beach house.
Oh, yeah.
That's a sweet addition, yeah.
Remember a good knife.
Congratulations on this book, and we're really glad to be able to talk to you here in midsummer and hope it does as well as it deserves to. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's show. If you have a question, a comment, or a guest suggestion, contact us at everythingcookbooks.com. We rely on listener support, and here are ways to help. You can subscribe to our newsletter at everythingcookbooks.substack.com. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. You can order books mentioned on the show through our affiliate page at bookshop.org, shop our t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other merch, or buy us a round of coffee. Reach out about advertising on the show or becoming a sponsor. As always, thank you to our editor, Abby Circatella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.